Senator, it is an honor to have a chance to speak with you. And for folks who are watching this whole interview on Rudy Blair Entertainment Media, rudyblairmedia.com, here I am, somebody myself who's been in the business for 35 plus years, speaking to a legend. And what do? I forget to turn my microphone on, the oldest thing that you should not do. And I do that to a legend. I apologize for that.
But you made it so much better because I was panicking, looking at all the little buttons. I don't know which ones. So you're a doll for doing that. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. And before we get into the book, like I said, it is an honor to have a chance to speak with you. How does it feel knowing that you have made such an impact in journalism, in Canadian news, just in the news and broadcast industry with everything that you've done over the years?
I think I was very, very fortunate. I mean, right place, right time, as that industry was really burgeoning and journalism was becoming a profession, not just a technical craft. And, then the days post Watergate, and it was all
Yeah.
such a sexy thing to do and all of that. So I feel really lucky that I had the opportunity to do that. And that said, as long as you're prepared to work 24/7, 7 days a week, and never say no to any crazy request that your boss has, then you're going to have a great time. Saw a lot of the world by simply saying yes.
How did you, like I said, I worked at, my first job in radio was at CKO, News and
Yeah,
Information. Later on, of course, for 20 plus years, I was at 680 News, which is now News
right.
680. So I know all the running around and things that can go on. How did you play it so cool on the air and giving you the information that was needed, knowing that, again, people are running around? You can see people running around you, knowing that the
Yeah.
story is so personable and heartbreaking at times. How did you play it so cool?
Live television, which is mostly what I did, although I did radio and newspapers too. But that simply has an ability to focus your mind. And I remember one of my old mentors, Bruce Phillips, who spent a lifetime in print and then went to TV. And I appeared on a television program that he did. And at the end of it, he said, "Were you not afraid of the camera?" And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Bruce. No, I forgot all about it. I forgot it was there." And he said, "Okay, well then get your to TV land," because he said you've got to get through that. You've got to remember always that you're speaking to one person. That camera is the face and the eyes, and as you say, the heart of somebody that you're trying to communicate with. They need to know what you're trying to share, and if you can connect with that person, then they will hear you. And that's what I tried to do every day, even when the chaos was around you, either in a studio or in a war zone. Sometimes the chaos in the studio is worse than the out in the field. But it was just such an interesting time to be in that business. It's also was a team thing. I know that a lot of the people that do TV and journalism today are running around with, their phone and they're by themselves. But in those days of doing television, you had a cameraman, you had a sound man, you had to sit in the edit booth afterwards and try and make heads or tails of this. And that it's a real process, and you get to really respect those that you work with, and they have your back, and you got to have theirs.
Yeah, young folks don't understand what it's like to trying to write your information down in the rain and
I know.
wash away just as you're supposed to go on
Yeah.
camera.
And then turn your phone around or something. I mean, hey, I'm having trouble just doing this. I think we're okay. I think we're okay.
What was it like making the transition from broadcast, being a journalist, to now being a senator?
Well, I had a really interesting stop in the middle, Rudy, and I was sitting in my office. I was running my own production company, doing a show called Pamela, Wallin Live, an hour a night, live television, talked to everybody everywhere in the world. It was professionally one of the best times of my life. And I get a call one night from the Prime Minister's office. And this is Jean Chrétien. And of course, lots of people can do their imitations of Jean Chrétien. So, you're really careful that this is actually who's calling you, right? But we had known each other for many years. So, and he asked, and this was in the wake of 9/11 and everything that had occurred there. And we met at an event back down in New York because my company went down to do a Canada Loves New York event. And then came this call saying, would you be our consul general in New York? So I went there for 4.5 years as a diplomat at the most amazing time in the history of that country, our country, and probably the world. So that transition was very easy because I brought all my journalism skills, putting people at the table, making sure a conversation could really happen. It was really important that we try it and kept the lines of communication open because the Americans at that point were feeling like, let's just shut it all down here, right? Let's keep everybody out. And so that was, it was often sitting at my dining room table in New York with 12 people, like just doing a big interview, a panel and trying, but you do your homework about the people that are there, them, what moves them, what they care about, and you do that. So then I came back to Canada and spent a year spending a fair amount of time in Afghanistan for Prime Minister Harper. With 4 other prominent Canadians to figure out what we should be doing there, what our troops needed. And then he asked if I would come to the Senate. So, you just talk about right time, right place, hard work, saying yes. I'm telling you, it's the way to have a really interesting life. And in the Senate, I was chair of the banking committee. I am chair of the banking committee now. I was chair of the defense committee. It's just an interesting window onto the world to see politics as it's done on the inside, as opposed to the way you viewed as a journalist on the outside.
Getting that back to that word journalist, author.
Yeah.
With an amazing book. Let's get into that. What is this new book called and what is it about? Because it's got to do with a 4-legged feline.
Little cats, little cat. I grew up really as a dog person, Rudy. I mean, we just had when I was born, we had a dog. So I just assumed I was a dog person. Then I went off into the world, too busy, lived a petless life for many years because I was running everywhere. And finally, because I had to kitty sit for a friend, and she had this chocolate point Siamese cat, and I just fell in love. I had no idea what kind of a relationship you could have. So of course I had to give her cat back. And so I went out and I didn't want to, mind you, but people intervened and said, no, you must. So I went and found one of my own, and she was this little tiny runt of the litter. And
is that Kitty? If I can interrupt, is that Kitty?
That was Kitty. That was Kitty. So I just, literally in the palm of the hand, and we stopped at the drugstore and got a little feeder and, one of those little tops. And she just moved into my heart in a way I couldn't have imagined. I had her for 19 years. She changed my life. Yeah, really did.
And this
is a tribute to cats because again, I love dogs, but I think cats are underappreciated. I think everybody thinks they're kind of mean and aloof, and they have those tendencies. They think they're pretty special, but they're they're so worth it when you have a relationship.
The book itself, though, it's yes, it's a tribute to Kitty. And it's a tribute to all cats, all types of cats, not just house cats,
That's
all types of cats.
I'm trying to be open-minded. I'm trying to be open-minded about all cats.
But also it's the history. You really start
Yeah.
from the beginning. Talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that, please.
Well, you see, that is when you're a journalist, you can't just write a book and say, oh, cats are great. Here's some pictures. You actually have to go and do it. So, um, just a friend of mine, a woman who worked with me, Sandra, she and I we started doing this at the end of the day, let's just go online. Let's just read because I'm a reader anyway. So you see lots of references to cats through history. And there's all the obvious stuff, I mean, they've been around for 12,000 years. So, they were goddesses in the Egyptian culture and this and that. And then the physical side of them became really intriguing to me because when you watch what they do and the way they move, like things like their ears, they have 36 muscles in each ear, and each ear can independently pivot 180 degrees. Anybody who has a cat has seen that. But if you stop and think about it, you go, okay, how does that happen? Right. And so you go and do a little reading about that, and then you find out all the other people that love cat. One of the things I remember as a kid reading the Diary of Anne Frank, the young Jewish girl, held captive, hiding in an attic, and she had a cat, but she called her diary, which was to become the Diary of Anne Frank, she called that diary Kitty. And so there's just connections upon connections everywhere. And I just found it interesting, cat has 9 lives, and it's because it's like the Trinity of Trinities, because the number 3 is really powerful in animal folklore and all of this. And cats have 3 3s, so, and there's a reason for that. They're very adept on their feet, and they can jump and land and all of that kind of stuff. So when you start to kind of go into it a little bit and figure out where does this creature come from, then you get intrigued. So look, I'm not an anthropologist, a biologist, a medical doctor, none of that stuff. But I believe that there's a lot of interesting things about these creatures which will help you just love them even more.
I will add this. I cat sat once for a friend of mine who was on vacation. I stayed over at her place. And the
Yeah,
one thing that I remember about her cat, who I loved, who actually got me
yeah,
loving cats, because I was never a pet person, period,
exactly.
was the fact that I could sit, and she lived in a condo. I could
Yeah,
sit, watch TV. This cat would walk over to the door, and a minute later, somebody would knock. And anybody
yeah,
who came to the door, the cat would always go to the front,
yeah,
sit, and wait. And then a minute or two later, somebody would knock. He was almost like my warning to let me know, hey, somebody's coming.
yeah. Radar system. They are extremely sensitive. I mean, I know this is true of dogs, but I think it's really true of cats. They can recognize your footsteps if you're coming up a sidewalk or up the stairs. And they recognize yours versus somebody they might not know. So they're extremely sensitive in terms of the sound. They hear things that, of course, we can't possibly hear. But I also really believe they're very intuitive. And when they've decided to take you on and protect you, they're just they can, and they do. And it's just, don't ever think some gesture that they're making is just random. Almost everything they do has purpose. And the joy of it too, like if you were kitty sitting, and I used to have people come and kitty sit too, because I couldn't bear to leave her alone. Like I say in the book, it's one thing you can always call your friends and say, oh, let's do lunch. But you can't do that with an animal. You need to be there. They need your presence. They need your commitment. And when an animal comes and sits on your lap, and the cat starts purring or you start petting, I defy you to get up. Like you just won't, because you don't want to disturb them, and it gives you kind of a peace of mind. There's a serenity with just comes with petting and relating to an animal. I really cherish it because our lives are nuts, And these little creatures help us, go, think about this. Think about this. Maybe you should take a break for a minute.
Absolutely. What do you hope people who, whether they're cat people or not cat people, what do you hope that they get from this book?
Well, I do hope they appreciate, um, we all need to be needed, right? In any way. And if for whatever your circumstances are in your life, this is a relationship that gives really a lot more than it takes, from you. Like, yes, you have to pet the animal. Yes, you have to provide food. Yes, all of those things. But what you get in return is so amazing, in terms of understanding that feeling of being needed. I think we all want that. And it gives you that. And I just think it's good for our heads. It's good for our hearts, but it's good for our heads to have an animal around. They make you put the other part of the world, and God knows, watching the news these days is enough to make anybody crazy. And if you can just engage with that creature for a while, you're going to live longer. You're going to actually be a better, kinder, gentler person. And that is a huge gift.
As we wrap this interview up, and as we speak, it's the beginning of 2024. Any advice
Yeah.
for folks out there? Because as you just said, it's a crazy world. I mean, and
Yeah.
especially when we started, we didn't have these things like social media and,
Right.
all this crazy information that's going around. We had to get our information from people like yourself. And right now, things are so confusing. What advice can you give folks out there who are just trying to handle their day-by-day lives?
Yeah, I really think it's important to take a break from the onslaught. People are busy. The economy is not great. It's very tough for a lot of people just to make ends meet, pay the mortgage. We all know what happens when you go to the grocery stores. The prices are high. Trying to drive your car, all of these, it's an expensive time. People are maybe working a little bit more overtime, so that they can help meet those bills. They're exhausted when they get home, and then they sit down and watch the world imploding in front of them. Shut it off. And I say that as somebody who earned a living for many years, I still have a podcast. I mean, I do think this stuff is important, but every once in a while, just shut it off. The world, your world is not going to end if you don't answer that phone or that text in the next 15 minutes. And I think that's what we're all finding. We just need to take a little bit of a break. And then, yes, for those that must be informed, like you and I, it's our job, right? It's our job. So you have to know what's going on. And so we don't have the luxury of shutting it off totally, but you have to find the moments when you can and really force yourself. We're all kind of junkies, right? So we have to we have to deal with the addiction, to the information and to the noise. But sometimes remember that some of it really is just noise.
Last question. This is a personal question. Asking a legend, how did I do in conducting this interview?
I think you did really, really well. And I think that whole thing that you constructed at the beginning about pretending not to turn your microphone on so that I wouldn't feel so intimidated by the technology. I thought that was really smart. I thought that was a smart maneuver. So yeah, I'm going to give you A on this one for sure.
Thank you so much. Like I said, it was such an honor to have a chance to speak with you. I hope we can do this again, and all the best in
Yeah, it was
2024.
great to talk to you. Really nice.